this schedule really shapes up for a playoff run with a 12-team playoff.
Areas that, you need to get from experience, which is just, hey, I need to make quicker decisions.
How do you define success for this team?
National championship.
What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here of the Cover 3 College Football Podcast, and we are back once again to talk some more college football on my summer school series today. That's my man, Nathan King of Auburn Undercover. We are talking the Auburn Tigers, looking for a big season. Nathan, what's going on, man?
I'm doing pretty well. How have you guys been?
I can't complain, man. To see the series is rolling on, and just like you there today, we are catching a lot of rain here in Orlando. So
yeah.
Hopefully skies come out a little brighter maybe tomorrow, which is also what Auburn thinks hopefully is going to happen for their season. So 5 wins last year. I think the metrics pretty much agree that they should have been probably a win, maybe a win and a half better to the good with some more neutral luck perhaps. What's the feeling around the program now?
I mean, it continues to be bolstered by recruiting. That's just the number one thing anyone's going to talk about in terms of Auburn. We ran a fan survey at our site, and the leading answer for how satisfied are you with the trajectory of the program was a 4 out of 5, which is pretty solid. And maybe you wouldn't expect after a pair of losing seasons, and honestly, 4 straight losing seasons when you go back to Brian Harsin. But I put a caveat in that question of assuming a continued top 10 recruiting class. And so that has been the big thing. I mean, I think people were really disappointed during last season. And then I think when you zoomed out after the fact, I don't really pay much attention to the argument that like, oh, year 0, year 1, that sort of thing. I don't know how much of a year 0 there is in the portal era, but maybe in Auburn's case there was, just because of how bad of a place the roster was in. So I mean, for a true year 1 to go 5-7, I mean, it's not great. I think the big thing that concerned me last year was what happened during games. And, Bill Connolly came out with his luck index, and it's like Auburn they're the number 1 in terms of like wins that they should have had that they did not get. There were just a lot of concerning trends. And as you mentioned, like, metrics wise, they had decent efficiency on offense. They had a bunch of dudes on defense, like middle of the pack SEC defense. Like, their numbers should have been good enough for 7 wins. And if you watch the games, that backs it up too. Like, they should have won the Oklahoma game. They're up by double digits in the 4th quarter at Missouri, and they allow Brady Cook, who went to the hospital, to come back and win that game. And so it's like just little things here and there that you miss. Honestly, you clean up a couple of those decisions, late game issues, you clean up a couple of those, that's probably good enough in and of itself for a couple more wins this season. So I think Auburn fans are very optimistic. This roster's in as good of a place as it's been probably since 2019. Very much a show me year for Hugh Freeze. I don't think it's like pressure packed hot seat type season, but it is a no more excuses, put up or shut up kind of season for Hugh Freeze.
It feels like they're in the window to win right now with how they recruited and some guys emerging like a Keldrick Falk and a Cam Coleman and whatnot. Last year, I remember we talked about the choice to go and get Peyton Thorne and how that was probably a commentary on what the staff, even if they wouldn't admit it publicly, thought about what the roster was in terms of like being ready to win. I think you nailed it, right? You're like, I don't think this is a playoff team or even one that would really sniff it. And I don't think either of us thought they would miss a bowl, but it certainly was within the mathematical realm of possibility, I guess, if things didn't go well. And the offense was certainly part of that. How will this offense change this year and why?
Yeah, it needs to be much more dynamic, needs to be much more consistent in the red zone, I think, is the number one thing. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but you can't be good finishing drives when you put up the kind of numbers they did and you consistently kind of melt down at the end. That was really the theme all season. It was like, as soon as Auburn got inside the opposing 35-yard line, you were like, what's going to happen? Like, oh, what are they going to do wrong here? I mean, the Peyton Thorne pick 6 against Oklahoma, where they were up at the end of the game and he threw a pick 6 with like 3 minutes left. I mean, that was on the opposing side of the field. Like, they're trying to ice the game away. And so just little things like that. I mean, that's where this offense needs to take its biggest steps forward, because in terms of the, explosiveness of their receivers, you saw that last year. There were flashes. Cam Coleman, I thought the last like 4 or 5 games of the year really started to get vertical, start to stretch the field. He was always like a red zone. I mean, he's just a giant. And now you add in the fact that Malcolm Simmons came along nicely. You add in a guy like Eric Singleton, who's like consensus, top 5 overall transfer in this class and is the fastest player on this team, one of the better slot receivers in the country. It all comes down to quarterback, though. Like you mentioned with Thorne, it was a very curious decision last year not to go get a quarterback in the portal, and you knew that they couldn't afford to do that. And then they lost all their returning quarterbacks, so it became a complete obvious thing for them to do. And you hate to put it all on the shoulders of one person, and it's not, but it is on the marriage of Jackson Arnold and Hugh Freeze's system and Derek Nix in his second year as the coordinator. Running back is also something on offense that needs to be talked about, because Jarquez Hunters, who they don't grow on trees. You don't find Jarquez Hunters just around the corner, the number 4 rusher in program history. Like, that just doesn't. So that's maybe a bit of an under the radar storyline. But Jackson Arnold, I think it's a good fit. I'm one of those people that I tend to believe that there's a lot of things to like about this. I think there would have been a lot of things to like last year if his entire offense hadn't gotten hurt at Oklahoma. So you look at this receiving core and it's like, if they all stay healthy and his O-line stays healthy at Auburn, I think he's got a decent chance to succeed, but they need to do it consistently. There were flashes for this offense last year. There were flashes of the RPO system and Hugh Freeze up-tempo and being really efficient, and then it would just conk out for 2+ quarters at a time, have dreadful turnovers, dreadful third down decisions, stuff like that. And so I think this personnel is in a really, really good place relative to where they've been the last few seasons. It's time to finally get some results out of it.
Offensive line also just on paper looks like a strength.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. It's the first time in quite a while where we've said, hey, Auburn's probably got one of the better offensive lines returning in the SEC. Maybe top. If you were to say they were the 4th best offensive line in the SEC, coming back, that might be a bit of a stretch, but it's somewhere in that maybe 4 to 6 category. As soon as the draft wrapped up, people looked ahead and said, hey, Connor Liu, their center, he could be a day 2 guy. So there's a lot of positive buzz for him. Xavier Chaplin, I think, is one of the most important names to know on this roster. I don't know where 24/7 had him in terms of transfer tackles, but it was very high. Guy that had some NFL draft buzz last year, then had a leg injury. So he's rehabbing from that. Mason Murphy is also a guy who comes over 2 years of starting experience at USC. It was kind of a question of can he win that job? His PFF numbers weren't great. Auburn fans really gravitated toward that. And I'm like, all right, guys, let's look beyond those. And he locked that down in the spring. There's no question he's their starting right tackle. And so pair that with the fact that Jeremiah Wright is a 6th-year senior, kind of a mauler, maybe late round NFL guard. Dylan Wade is not a particularly dynamic offensive lineman, but he is really experienced there at left guard. And so I think absolutely this group is a strength if at the very least you need them to be a strength this season. If in a few months we're talking about some struggles early in the year by that offensive line against SEC defenses, they are going to be in a pretty bad spot, I think.
Can this team get where it needs to go if Arnold is just doing what's schemed up for him, making some plays with his legs? I think I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because the track record as a high schooler was strong. And also, as you mentioned, the injury situation in Oklahoma was a disaster last year. They kind of jerked him around a lot playing Michael Hawkins, who ended up not being all that effective either. And obviously they canned their entire offensive coaching staff because Venables didn't really make a big-time hire. He kind of hired his boys. So I think there's a lot of, okay, he played poorly, but if does Auburn need him to play like a former 5-star to accomplish their goals for the season, or do they just kind of need him to execute what Freeze schemes up?
Yeah, it's a very worthwhile question. I don't think you need him to be a top 3rd quarterback in the SEC. I'll rephrase that. Maybe you need him to be you don't need him to be a top 4th quarterback, maybe a top 3rd, though, or at least in the top half of the league in terms of what he's executing. I think it comes down to what you just said. He needs to be the kind of guy that is what Hugh Freeze has said he is all offseason. That is his blend of, number one, he's got the experience now, but 5-star arm talent, really quick decision making, and his legs. You mentioned that. That's a really underrated part, I think. 444 rushing yards for him last season. They don't need him to be a former 5-star. They don't need him to be a 5-star this season, mostly because of his talent at wide receiver. I think this season is going to be about getting that receiving core in a position to succeed, because it is the best receiving core at Auburn since those dudes Tuberville had, in the early 2000s. And again, this is just on paper. but at the same time, it's not on paper. Like Eric Singleton, we've seen it. Cam Coleman, we saw it at the end of last year. Like they have some dudes at wide receiver. Horatio Fields is a Wake Forest transfer who we had rated pretty highly at 24/7. And so pair that with the offensive line. Running back is again, kind of a big question, but I think that it's going to be about that execution. It's going to be about that game plan. It's going to be about that scheme. And it's going to be about finally getting those things to be in a good connotation. Like those are all derogatory terms for Hugh Freeze at Auburn right now. If you were to ask an Auburn fan about the last 2 seasons, like the RPO was grinding metal. I mean, it was painful to watch. It would be consistent, like I mentioned, consistent for a little bit. And then it was like, why is this such a high degree of difficulty? Was it the system had some issues? Was it the fact that Peyton Thorne wasn't very talented as a passer? I think both things were correct. If you can take both of those elements and improve them a couple notches this season, I think Jackson Arnold will be just fine. Also, they have a lot of dudes on defense, so I think he needs to be pretty good. I don't think he needs to be great, and that could set the baseline for them to win 7 or 8 games.
Very confident Singleton is the number 2 on the offense.
Number 2 receiver?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's 1 and 1A with him and Cam Coleman in terms of just what they do. Because Coleman's never going to leave the outside. And then Singleton is going to be just kind of do it all. Now he played a little bit on the outside at Georgia Tech, but like he'll have the ball in his hands on some sweep stuff. We saw that a lot in the spring. Look for him and Malcolm Simmons to, again, kind of goes back to the running game that I talked about. Maybe that helps you out a little bit. You've got a quarterback with legs. You've got 2 receivers who are really, really fast. But in terms of just field stretching, taking the ball, screen pass and going 50 yards, like Eric Singleton has all of those abilities. And so I think it's a nice split for them right now to know that you just keep Cam Coleman on the outside. You probably spell him with Horatio Fields, maybe a little bit of Perry Thompson mixed in there. But yeah, those guys, as far as I'm concerned, 1 and 1A in terms of receiving talent for this offense. Singleton's the guy who's done it and has a ton of experience at Georgia Tech. A ton of production. 2 years at Georgia Tech. Cam Coleman's the guy. You saw it a little bit. 8 touchdowns was really, really good. But you're like, his best football is nowhere even close right now. He hasn't even scratched the surface of his potential.
So for all of our college fantasy players out there, obviously it's kind of running back by committee projection. But if somebody does kind of like emerge and take the reins and all of a sudden they're getting 60, 70, 80% of the carries, do you have some inside track on who the guy could be?
It's really, really tough. Your knee-jerk answer would be Damari Alston, senior, former 4-star out of Atlanta. Guy who's a rare breed nowadays, has spent 4 years at school at one place, and he has not been the starter any of those years and probably could have gone to a power program if he wanted to. But talked to him this spring. He said he had to take on a different mindset now. He's projecting to be the lead rusher. At least that's what he's saying. And that's what we saw most of in the spring. I will say Jeremiah Cobb is a former top recruit as well. I believe he was like a top 150 guy. He can do a little bit more with the ball in terms of catching it out of the backfield. Neither of those guys, though, like strike a ton of fear into you, at least right now, in terms of straight up running the ball downhill. I'll throw out, I hesitate to say a wild card name because they got him to contribute, but Darrell Robinson is a transfer from UConn, went for 700-ish yards last season. His advanced numbers are really, really interesting. He's like 6'1", 220. We mistook him for a linebacker one day in the complex, but he had one of the best breakaway percentages in all of college football last year. Like his breakaway rate was up there with Jarquez Hunter. So you're talking about a guy that's like got linebacker, smaller wide receiver type size, and he's a really, really explosive ball carrier. I hesitate to, I think it's because having been around Alston and Cobb the last couple years, like having seen them in this program, and granted, they haven't had big roles yet, but they haven't done that much to like blow me away. And there's the novelty of a guy like Darrell Robinson, who I haven't seen play at Auburn yet, but it would not surprise me if Darrell Robinson is RB1 just because of all the tools he brings to the table. But if you ask me right now in May, my answer would be Damari Alston. Has the experience, has done it in this system before, very familiar with his coordinator and coach and staff and offensive linemen. So that's probably, if you're willing to make a bet right now, it'd probably be Damari Alston.
All right, let's hit a break. On the flip side, we'll continue our Auburn conversation, talk to the Tigers defense.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
And welcome back here to the Cover 3 College Ball Podcast on our summer school series today. It's Auburn We're going undercover with Nathan King, Auburn Undercover. Nathan, let's talk a little defense here. Last year, it was an improved defense. I think, well, 23 did some good things as well at times, but like 24 wasn't awful. What changes do you think you will see for this defense in 25?
Yeah, it's gonna be very reliant on the secondary. I think. I mean, it's not necessarily been one that's leaned on the front seven very much recently. They haven't had a ton of playmakers there over the last few seasons. They've got a lot of talent along the defensive line, but just like other than Keldrick Falk, who's probably a first round pick next year, other than him, they just haven't necessarily shown it. You talk about what to look for this season and how they're going to change and evolve. I'm just really interested to see, because you look back at DJ Durkin's previous coaching stops, his players talked about how their roles kind of developed over the course of a few seasons, even as recently as like Texas A&M and Ole Miss. You saw guys start to like flex out, in year 2 and year 3 in his system. Really interested to see what that means for somebody like a DeMarcus Riddick, who last year was like full-time quarterback spy, which is a great role to have as a true freshman in the SEC, getting 25 snaps a game. Interested for a guy like Amaris Williams, who's a former 5-star defensive end. It's like he was getting 10 snaps a game, just pure get after the quarterback type guy. Does he take on a little bit more of a versatile role this season? And so there is, I mean, it doesn't need to be overstated that their defense, like you said, was pretty solid last year, and they do not need to take any steps back, only steps forward. I thought it was decently impressive what they did on the defensive side of the ball last year. They played more true freshmen than anybody in all of college football. By the end of the year, there were 8 true freshmen on defense getting very consistent snaps. And so that's probably something to look at this season. It's, I think, probably one of the biggest storylines for the year. It's not even only on defense, on offense as well. When you talk about Coleman and Malcolm Simmons, that sophomore jump. Don't have a sophomore slump if you're talking about these guys like Riddick and Amaris Williams. Caleb Harris is just a nasty dude at safety. Jay Crawford started at corner as a true freshman in the SEC. Those guys all need to take a step forward. If they can just all take a couple inches worth of a step forward, and you combine that all together, this can be a really solid defense this year. I think there's a lot of confidence in that building about DJ Durkin and his coaching ability. Those outgoing guys last year when their season ended, guys like Eugene Asante, guys like Jalen McLeod, who were on their way out, they were very adamant. They were like, they have to keep Durkin around. He is so important for this program. You saw in the offseason, maybe a couple other programs made a swing for him. Auburn made sure he got paid, and obviously they're hoping it pays off this season.
They do face some quarterbacks who I think are really good, and then some that are maybe good, and some that I think we're pretty confident are not that great. I mean, I thought Robertson last year for Baylor was really good, and I personally I thought if he had jumped in the portal, he would have been the top kid in the portal over Mateer. But obviously Baylor paid up to keep him and his OC. UMass, no. Kentucky, almost certainly no. Georgia, maybe. Missouri, probably not. LSU, yeah, they got a dude. Vandy's got it, especially if that system's got a dude. Arkansas, like Green's not bad, but I mean, I think if you're Auburn where you want to be, like Green doesn't scare you that much. I would think. Mississippi State, no. Oklahoma, maybe. Like Bama, possibly. I guess. I'd be surprised if they have terrible quarterback play at Bama. But I mean, there's a lot of teams here where you can play a defense that takes advantage of college quarterbacks. Like you don't face a whole lot of guys here who are going to the NFL.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it's going to start early on. We're going to see in week 1 on a Friday night, like you said, who I think is one of the more underrated players in college football. Sawyer Robertson was obviously a huge part of Baylor having that huge second half surge last season. And then that trip to Norman, it's like, you took their quarterback. Obviously he was on his way out already. I think if Auburn had been able to get John Mateer, they would have gotten John Mateer. Like that's kind of an obvious thing to say, but that would be huge for Auburn to be able to win that game. I just think it would be a huge confidence boost for somebody like Jackson Arnold. I don't think he holds any animosity for Oklahoma. I mean, it wasn't really anybody's fault what happened last season. I mean, it was just such an amalgamation of issues. You look at that trip to Texas A&M, guy like Marcel Reed, they held him down pretty well last season when they were up 21-0, and then he came back and obviously that game went to, I believe, 4 overtimes if I'm remembering off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting lineup of opposing offenses. You get somebody like a new look Georgia passing game. You get them on your home field. You get a new look Missouri offense on your home field. You get a new look Alabama offense on your home field. You get Zach Calzada, who had some choice words for Auburn when he committed to Kentucky. You get him coming back to Auburn and him on your home field. So you're right. A couple guys there on the high end, but that's a good point by you. Not exactly a murderer's row of opposing quarterbacks this season. Like you said, they definitely have to take advantage of that.
And just thinking of like the way that Durkin has wanted to play defense when he was, at A&M and Ole Miss, and even back to Maryland, it seems like a defense to me like that the very, very high end guys don't have much of a problem with, because they're like super accurate. They can be patient. It's not like, and I don't think you have to be attacking to be a good defense. I mean, obviously, like you can just win in the red zone and hold opponents down, especially if the offense can actually score, which would be a nice change for this year. But yeah, like they don't play that many. Let me ask you this: who is a guy, and you can't say quarterback because that's just cheating. Who's a guy who maybe he finally lives up to his potential, or maybe he arrives a year early and is like, oh shoot, he's as good as we thought he could be, but he's that good right now, who could really change their fortunes this season?
Yeah, somebody I mentioned already, Amaris Williams. He was a guy that admitted in the spring. I think he was their second highest rated signee last year behind Cam Coleman. I think he was a top 35-ish overall recruit. Look, he admitted to us like he was not in the right headspace last season. It was a rocky off. Oh, he's hilarious. He's absolutely tremendous. It was a rocky offseason for him. He entered the portal, or at least he was set to enter the portal, and the coaching staff actually went to his house in North Carolina and convinced him to come back out. But I mean, he is one of the most physically impressive players on a practice field I've ever seen. Now, that sentence holds absolutely no weight when it comes to football games, but if he can start to put those things together, this is a guy who played running back in high school, like 280-pound guy carrying the ball for long touchdowns. He is super, super explosive. We already mentioned Keldrick Falk. He's going to be at that defensive end spot. Their buck linebacker, they call him, is their pure pass rushers. Amaris Williams can play there. If he's a somewhat good complement to a guy like Falk, then you don't need your defensive tackles to be tremendous. Now, it's keeping in that vein, and I'm going to stay on the defensive line just because I think it's so, so important for Auburn this season. They've got to get a defensive tackle to step up. Like, it has been a detriment for them the last couple seasons. It's the reason why, and I love Malik Blockton, younger brother of Marcus Harris, kid who played a ton as a true freshman last year. But there's a reason why Malik Blockton played a ton as a true freshman. There's a reason why a 3-star kid from down the road played a ton as a true freshman. You didn't have anybody else in the room. You had Philip Bleedy from Indiana was probably your other best player. And it's like, that just doesn't move the needle very much. Similar type of rebuild for this defensive line. As you know, Bud, like you can't just go get a superstar defensive tackle in the portal. Like there's only 2 or 3 of them every single year that enter the portal, and you are going to have to, you're going to have to pony up for a guy like that. Now, given the circumstances, I think they did pretty good. Jay Hardy comes over from Liberty. Dallas Walker's a name people remember from Texas A&M. Does he have anything left in the tank after being over at Western Kentucky? Maybe. But none of those names I mentioned move the needle a lot. They have some absolute freak shows, true freshmen on this defensive line. Malik Autry and Jordan Crawford in particular. I mean, Jordan Crawford is like, if you told me he was 370 pounds, I would believe you. He's not. He's like 6'1", 340. If those two guys, you mentioned it in your question, like start to put it together early, either Malik Autry or Jordan Crawford, one of those two defensive tackles, if they are making a difference by November, I think it's going to be a really, really good thing for this team, because we already mentioned what they have at end and at edge rusher, and a guy like Riddick who can rush the passer. You've already got talented guys there. You pick up some run stuffers on the inside, guys who can really kind of create gravity there on the interior. And I think Falk can kick inside. He absolutely has done that in the past. If you can get a guy like a Malik Autry, who's just a monster, Jordan Crawford's a monster, if they're playing with some confidence as 18-year-old freshmen in the SEC, easier said than done. I think it's going to make a big difference for this team.
All right, so how do we define success for Auburn in 25?
That's the question, isn't it? I mean, I don't think anybody, even, athletic director John Cohen, I don't think anybody at Auburn has a number in mind for wins and losses, right? Like, I don't think it's that type of season. I think, and Hugh Freeze caught a lot of flack for this. I tweeted this on the first day of spring practice, and some people really didn't like this. Hugh Freeze, at the end of this press conference, one of his answers, he said, "We've just got to go win some football games." And a bunch of people are like, "Oh, Captain Obvious." And it's like, no, I think that's the right. There's all the excuses are sort of falling off at this point. The shades of your old Brian Harsin roster, they're starting to disappear. You are no longer in a position. I think that probably goes for most coaches in most jobs in year 3, right? Like, you're just not in position to make a bunch of excuses about what's happened previously, where are the rosters. You're a top 10 recruiting team. You've brought in top 10 transfer classes. You had a ton of money to go get somebody like a Jackson Arnold, who, I mean, again, he may not be a world beater, but he was a good quarterback in the portal, and Auburn said, we want him. Let's get him. Eric Singleton, obviously, was a massive win for them in the portal. Xavier Chaplin, massive win for them in the portal. You have a staff that has a ton of continuity from last year. You brought both your coordinators back. You've got an experienced quarterback. You got some of the best receivers in the country. There are not a ton of excuses left for this team. Now, I think its success this season will be decent amount of positive progress. And that's a really convoluted politically correct way for me to say, I don't know how many wins, because I think 7-5, where you played really tough against some, because the SEC could be really good this year. Like, if Oklahoma and A&M are really good, like, Baylor's going to be one of the better teams in the Big 12. Like, this is not a cakewalk of a schedule. It is a top-loaded schedule, though. And we can get to that if you want. Like, it's the back end is going to be a little bit better, or a little bit easier for Auburn. If you go 7-5 and there is a lot of proof of concept, and you continue recruiting at a top 5, top 10 level, I think that's pretty good. You don't need to go 6-6. Let's stop messing with that territory. 8-4. I don't care how you get there. Complete. You're good. 2 thumbs up. Maybe 1 thumb and the other one kind of halfway there. You want to feel like, I think success for Auburn this year, you want to feel like you're on the championship path. I'm not saying you're playing for one or contending for one this season, but you are getting on the road with your shoes on, and you are walking the championship path. You feel like the program is heading in that direction. Because if they get on the field, Bud, and they keep blowing fourth quarters and having really bad decisions at the end of games, and quarterbacks throwing pick sixes at the end of games and giving up 94-yard drives at the end of games, that doesn't feel good. You lose to Vanderbilt at home. That doesn't feel good. You don't feel like you're moving in the right direction if you lose to Diego Pavia for a 4th straight season. If you're Hugh Freeze, like, it's more of the same. You're spinning your wheels. So I think if Auburn feels like they are putting it in drive, they're moving in the right direction, a couple wins worth of improvement, 2 or 3 wins worth of improvement, offensive proof of concept, that's a big checklist, but it's also not a crazy checklist when you look at how good this roster is and how good of an offensive coach Hugh Freeze is supposed to be. He's been a tremendous recruiter so far. Maybe it's time this season, now that he's got such good personnel, I think he's really, really comfortable, never been more comfortable at Auburn, maybe start to get a little bit more dynamic in terms of your in-game coaching. I think all of that could definitely add up to 2 or 3 more wins for Auburn.
Nathan, really enjoyed it, man. Always appreciate the time. We'll see you soon.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.